Hello, my name is Melissa Allen, and I would like to present ExamFacts, the next generation of respiratory preparation. ExamFacts is a fresh and modern, exceptional 30-day exam preparation program unlike anything on the market. Our CSE program is amazing, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I would like to introduce you to these products and how we came up with this program. Well over a decade ago, myself, other educators across the country noticed that students began to change. They were no longer responding to traditional methods of education, especially reading, somewhat writing, but research. The traditional classroom methods just weren't working as well on them, and they weren't retaining the information as much as previous generations. What had happened is students have evolved into this modern digital generation. We did a lot of research. We spoke to neuroscientists. We had a neuroscientist on the team in development, and we came up with this modern exam preparation for a modern society. So that's the reason we created ExamFacts. There are a lot of traditional programs out there that are really good programs, but they're, in addition to them being more traditional in their methods, some of them do have videos, but there's a lot that are just written materials, books, things like that. It's not quite as comprehensive as an approach. The way we're approaching this situation is that these students really did not take as much out of the classroom as previous generations. This is an ideal program. We've had huge success with students who'd been out of school for a long, long time. We've had students that were out of school that were working as CRTs for decades that were able to pass with this program because it's so much more comprehensive. The other programs out on the market are really not for those students that did not do well in school, that were not the lower end students, or maybe they had to drop out of school for some reason and then come back. And so it's been a long time since they've gotten the information. They may not have really gotten it fully the first time around. And then it just seems like the more years go by, students are more learn and purge. They're learning everything, but then you have that build on that information in the next course, and they're not really having truly understood it. So this is a big problem. In the meantime, schools are losing accreditation and test scores are dropping, and here we are a month and a half, really, or 2 months from the new 2020 TMC and CSE, and we have an idea through the matrix what's going to be on that exam, but we really don't know for sure how much more complicated or in-depth it's going to be, how many more, if they'll have actual CT scans on there, more in-depth x-rays, that sort of thing. All right, so I have used this picture as a visual, and this is kind of what I've been talking about is I feel like there's this big gap between the TMC and the students. I live in Arizona, so this picture is kind of relevant to me. We are the Grand Canyon State, if you do not know. And there is a huge divide between graduates and pass rates. Students are failing after investing the time and money into these programs, and a lot of it is because the students are changing, or they may not have been necessarily prepared for respiratory school, didn't have the study habits, or something may have happened during respiratory school. And at the same time, the exam is getting more and more in depth. And here we have the new exam coming up in addition to that, 3 attempts and the 120-day waiting period imposed by the MBRC. So this is just a lot of things that are happening at the same time, and I feel like the gap between the students and the exam is wide and just getting wider, especially as we move into the 2020 exams. So there is obviously not a quick fix to that huge gap. That's why we have created ExamFacts. ExamFacts is the most comprehensive program on the market. It is a full 30 days for the TMC prep. The students need to go in there and work every day for 30 days in order to be prepared. And it covers, we'll go into the exact material it covers in just a minute, but it covers everything on the matrix for the most part. I mean, there's some little small things that we did not cover, but those are things that are maybe 1 to 2 questions. But we encompass the whole matrix. We just did it in a different way that is much more student-friendly, much more student-friendly, organized. And it's almost like a respiratory school type organization. So they're very familiar with it and they tend to grab onto it really easily. And we engaged all those neuroscience principles from our neuroscientist that was on the team that kind of forces them to learn against their will, if you will. As far as the timing of the lessons, doing something with the material after the lessons. And our primary emphasis throughout the whole program, both programs, the TMC and the CSE, is critical thinking and problem solving. We are not teaching memorization, although, of course, there's a lot of raw facts and data they must know, including formulas. And we're getting a little nervous about the formulas as now that they're able to use a calculator on the 2020 exam. You know, are the formulas going to be more complex? Or are they going to go ahead and put a lot of O2 content on there? The formulas that the students don't necessarily know right away. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit more about the modern student. So we embrace the modern student. We understand these students. They want their information quickly and visually. These students really live on their phones, their tablets, and this program is completely accessible on all those devices 24 hours a day and with 24-hour-a-day support as well. Now, the program is made up of short video lessons. There is downloadable study guides that they do take actual handwritten notes on because we're all aware that that actual writing does trigger the brain to remember. So they do have some of the information is pre-printed, especially the earlier information that where there are like something like the medications with the micrograms versus milligrams. You know, we have that pre-printed because we don't want them to mess that up. Whereas other parts they have to do all as they move through the course, they're filling in everything on their own. So they have to like listen to the lecture and fill in the information themselves. So they're really, really retaining that information. We have digital flashcards that they can review to really make sure they're knowing those answers before it comes up. And then we do not have 140 question quiz, an exam for them to take because we have well over 300 quiz questions in the program. But we do not believe that practicing more and more tests is the way they learn, because what they're doing is they're trying to look at those newer test questions, relate them to a previous test question, and then they're making educated guesses. We're trying to actually teach them how to get to the right answer based on certainty and knowledge of the concept, the disease process. All right, so let's talk about those actual 30 days and this is the TMC program. We'll go into the CSE in just a minute. And in these foundational lessons, we are doing things like ABG review, oxygenation, medications, X-ray, EKG. EKG actually covers not only the rhythms, but all of the cardiac drugs that they would need dependent on the rhythm, hemodynamics, PFT. So this is just all of the basics. And so this is really where we found that a lot of students were weak in some of these areas. And it's really hard to build if you're weak in some of these areas or if you forgot a lot because you're either in a bachelor's program or it's been a long time since you're in school, or even somebody who had a gap in their education. This all could have happened a long time ago. And once they get to mechanical ventilation, they're so knee deep in mechanical ventilation, they can't even really remember the basics of the anatomy and the medications and X-ray and diagnostics. So this is really, really helpful. This is foundational lessons. Each day is about an hour to an hour and a half. It could be up to 2 hours depending on how dedicated that student is or how much they do not understand. So they can rewatch this video as many times as they want, the lesson. And so a lot of times we'll see that they kept rewinding certain sections to try to understand it or to try to find some information so that they could fill out the study guide correctly. All right, this is kind of the bread and butter of the program, is our disease management sessions. We teach these students to recognize and manage the various diseases and disorders on the TMC, and we do that using unique learning tools that allow the students to readily identify problems, diagnose instantly what that condition is, and implement the appropriate treatment. So they're able to just, these fluffy infiltrates, they're gonna know, right away where they're gonna go, and they'll know what. And this is really helpful not only for the TMC, but as a basis for review for the CSE. We have found that the students that took both courses have done super well on the CSE, secondary to the fact that they know all of these informations on disease management. They're able to really, really diagnose and implement treatment plans and know what the test question is asking versus just kind of making a guess. Because we know there's such distractors on the TMC, and if you're not certain between two disease processes, there is always that other answer that goes with the disease process that it's almost like, but is not really. So it's really important that they understand these disease processes inside and out. And we really, really cover them in depth. And in this section, there's a lot of the digital flashcards. So they can really, really understand them. Okay, move right along. So the 30-day course finishes up with these advanced concept lessons. This is initiating mechanical ventilation, adjusting ventilator settings, troubleshooting mechanical ventilation, additional ICU monitoring, weaning strategies. And then, of course, there's a test taking skills just at the end to kind of remind them how to use their paper that they get and how to write down their equations right away. Just all sorts of basic test taking tips and tricks. Okay, this is just the TMC course video. There will be a second video where we'll cover the CSE, but I wanted to go over some of the numbers. So, out of the 247 courses completed that we received surveys on, because as program directors, I'm sure you're all familiar with how easy it is to get people to take surveys. Even when they're online digital surveys, it's not much easier than it is to get those COARC surveys. So we had 247 and 187 had previously tested. So these are students that had already failed the TMC. The lowest test score was 47, and then the highest was 88. There were some that had passed the low cut. They just couldn't get the high cut. The vast majority were in the 70s. The greatest improvement we had was 60 points. We're not doing percentages. We're doing, going from somewhere in the 40s or 50s to like well over 100 with that 60 points. And most of the, not most, but we had a lot of increases of 40 to 50. The high cut pass rate on those who had previously tested and failed was 96.9%. The high cut pass rate for the first time testers, was 95.4%. It was slightly lower, but there's some reasoning behind this. And the high score was 127, and the average, when we put them all together, out of that 247 was 102. So we had lots of 120s in there, 116s, 118s to bring that score up there, that mean score. Sorry. Let me go to the next page, if it'll let me. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the numbers. There was attrition in both groups, and when we started this with several schools, there were schools that purchased it for their students that did not incorporate it into a class for a grade. That's when we had some students that just weren't doing it regularly. They were doing like 4 days and then they take 4 days off. And that's why I think we had those poor numbers on the first time pass rates, because they were not doing the program consistently. Attrition was really high. All those numbers are about people who completed the course. This is 30 days. So we did give some free courses away at the beginning. We gave around 40 of them away. I would say half of those students did not complete the course because they were already graduated and they just had never been able to pass the TMC, and they just didn't have the motivation. They would work for 2 days, then they would take 7 days off, then they would work for 1 day, and they were going very slowly, and they weren't going to pass at that level because it was obvious they did not care. So once we started talking to the schools and telling them it's really best that you give this program to your students in the last 30 days of school and make it count for a grade of some sorts. Once they did that, those students had great numbers because they had the accountability and they were doing it as the program was meant to be done. Because the 1 to 1.5 hours a day of studying is really meant to have them maximize that retention of that information, to have them just do that consistently and working the same way over and over again. All right, now we're in the classroom. This is a little bit different view than the students would have, but I wanted to show you this view because I can jump in and out on this view. I apologize for all my stuff on the top. But in this view, you can see that we can, go into different classes. The students can only do this in order. They cannot jump around like I'm doing. So they must do day 1 before day 2, so on. Now, once they've done day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if they run into something in day 7 that they want to review ABGs on, then absolutely they can go back to that previous day. So, okay, I'm going to stop the... Okay, so this is the video and it kind of plays automatically. There's some little instructions that tells them what to do. This is their actual little review sheet. And then there's the quiz afterwards. Okay, so we'll jump into the next section, which is diseases. So we have asthma management. Now here, notice how in disinfectant, there's a lot of specific instructions. So we had a lot of that study guide pre-filled out. So whereas here, once we're getting to ExamFacts our asthma management, we have these study guides where they are literally having to fill in all of the information on their own. So they're having to really take notes when they're going through this. They might be using these digital flashcards to kind of get some of the information. Go ahead and play that for you. So these are the vital signs. What kind of vital signs should we be expecting? And then the flash of the answer will come by. These are just going to be basic, and we'll talk about pulse paradoxus a little later. We'll just jump through there. Yeah. And so this is kind of very similar to that study guide, and they are really learning how to really take apart each of the signs and symptoms of the diseases. And not only that, towards the end there, they're going to choose what kind of oxygen, what kind of medication are they going to need, what kind of ventilator or MPV recommendations would this patient have, and this is where we'd want to say something like a paralytic. And then education, this is going to be huge in asthma. Emergency management, we would want to talk about something that would make us think that this patient need to be intubated. Chronic management, this is going to be our asthma action plan. So all of this stuff is going to be filled in by the student in this area here. And this is just going to help them really take apart these diseases like they never have before. They're going to just take it apart, separate it into different sections and recommendations, and really, really understand what's going on with the patients. And we do all that in the breakdown here in the video. This particular video is 36 minutes long. So it's going to tell them all of that information as well. And we have like neonatal management is it's over an hour, but it couldn't be helped because there's so much neonatal on the TMC and on the CSE. Neonatal is a lot more than pediatrics now in the 2020. And so here we're just really, this is one of those where they may not have so much information, so we gave them a lot of information. So we have all about the mechanical ventilation, the MPPV, what they should be doing, some basic settings, and then for notes. And then they have this very, very long, and this is just our little survey at the end that we have in that form. And then this is just our quiz. So each lesson is a study guide, a video lesson, and a quiz minimally. Many of them have additional things such as the virtual flashcards. In addition to that, there are case studies that they have to do here and there. There's 6, and these case studies are where they get to practice. Do they know what's going on? You know, this one, obviously it's some kind of fire because we have a fire thumbnail there. But they're going to get the information here. This is actually their... Okay, so here's the case study. So all this data and all these labs, and they need to decide what they're going to want to do. And then a lot of these case studies will have PFTs. A lot of these case studies will x-rays. This particular one does not, but they need to make decisions based on this. So this is all they're getting. And so it's just kind of getting them used to the sims and breaking apart a question so they really know what's going on. And this is very similar to the ones they've been doing as study guides. However, when you get here, it's more asking question. What is the disease? What do you suspect is going on? Is there an oxygenation problem? Is there a ventilation problem? What are the problems? Are the labs abnormal? You know, what do you want to do? What do you recommend? So they're really, really starting to think that way. And then, of course, in this little video lesson, we give them those answers so they can make sure they're understanding it. And if they didn't choose something, they can understand why it was important to choose, so that when they see it again, they can really understand. And this is only 5 minutes long, or 10 minutes long. So it's not huge, but we're going into detail about what's in there. So if you would like to know any more information, if you think this is a good fit for your students, and it is not a good fit for everyone, because there are some students that are doing really, really well. If your school has really high numbers, you probably do not need us because we are probably overkill. This is the kind of program that is meant to be so in-depth and so comprehensive that as you go through the program, there's no information left unturned, so to speak. We are really covering everything, and we're forcing the students to think about it with critical thinking, break it apart so that it's little bits and pieces, so it's completely understandable, and then they can apply that knowledge on the TMC. So please, if you are at all interested, just shoot me an email and we can have a meeting. We could talk about it. We can get a price set up for your school. And the more students you have, of course, the lower it'll be. But it's really, really a nice self-paced program. There is no tech glitches. I mean, knock on wood, because it's very easy. Once they're in the program, they go to day 1 and literally they can't mess this up. This is, you go ahead and download these. It says right here, download. And that means you click on it to download. So they would download this computer. They can just read this one here. and then they watch this. They just press the play button. If they want to back up or go forward, they can, although you may not move on to the next lesson until you've watched something in its entirety and taken and passed the test. So the quizzes must be passed in each of these regular sections. They can't move on to the next day until they pass the quiz. So they have to take their quiz. And then only then can they move on. I'm able to jump around because I have admin abilities. But they have to do it in order. It's really, they can't get lost. I know a lot of students just need something a little bit more user-friendly. And it's not their fault. They've just been trained to watch videos all day and just click on the button and press pause, play. They're not used to kind of jumping around things. And that's the problem we had with a lot of the programs that are already out there, is they're not really user-friendly. They want them to maybe take a practice test, see where they do poorly, then jump into that section from some other section, maybe even reading things, downloading PDFs. I've seen a lot of different things, but it's just not organized in a way that is so systematic that you just literally log on here and you do day 1. The next day you do day 2. There's no way that they can get lost. And it's organized so that it builds on the information. Obviously, mechanical ventilation's towards the end. It's very much a respiratory school type organization, except for we're concentrating only on the TMC type things. No real world, all TMC answers, all TMC written questions. All study guides are organized towards the TMC guidelines. So it's just really an easy thing for them to go through. We've had such great reviews from students that have been out of school for a while. They're like, oh my gosh, it's like it brought it all back because it's so respiratory school organized. All right, I don't want to take up any more of your time. This is already 27 minutes, but thank you again so much for sitting through this lecture with me, this review with me of our amazing product. And let me know if you'd like any more information. Thank you so much.